Hi, fourth graders. This lesson is on fish identification, and hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to identify different fish species that are common to the Lander area. Before I move on with the presentation, there are two definitions that I would like you to know. The first is a native fish. A Wyoming native fish species means the fish is originally from Wyoming. The second definition is a non-native fish. A non-native fish to Wyoming means that the fish is not originally from Wyoming, but was brought here by humans from another place. Reasons that non-native fish were brought to Wyoming include sport fishing and food. The first fish species that I'm going to talk about is the cutthroat trout, which is the only trout species that is native to Wyoming. Cutthroat trout get their name by the red slash underneath their jaw, which I'm showing you with the yellow arrow on the bottom picture. There are 6 cutthroat trout subspecies that are native to Wyoming. Today I'm just going to talk about the Yellowstone cutthroat trout because that's the subspecies that is native to the Lander area. Yellowstone cutthroat trout can be found in rivers such as the Poposia River, the Wind River, and throughout Yellowstone National Park. The next fish species I'm going to talk about is rainbow trout. Rainbow trout are one of the most common fish species in Wyoming and North America. Despite how common they are only native to the Pacific coast in states such as California, Oregon, and Washington, but they were introduced throughout North America and Wyoming mainly for sport fishing. They're very common in the Poposia River and in places like Lucky Pond, where we stock rainbow trout for people to catch. Golden trout are a close relative of the rainbow trout. They also are not native to Wyoming. They're native to California, but they've been introduced to Wyoming for sport fishing. The Wyoming Game and Fish Department currently stocks golden trout by helicopter in lakes within the Wind River Mountains, and people come from all over the world just to catch golden trout. Brown trout is another trout species that is very common in Wyoming and the Lander area. They are native to Europe and were brought to North America over 100 years ago for sport fishing. They're probably one of the most sought after sport fish species in rivers such as the Poposia and Wind Rivers. Brook trout are also a very common trout species caught by anglers in our state, particularly in the mountains. They are not native to Wyoming, but are originally from the eastern United States. And if you look at the top picture where I have the yellow arrow pointing, it's pointing to a square tail. And that's important because the next slide I'm going to talk about a closely related species that looks like a brook trout. Lake trout are another popular sport fish species in our state that are not native. Lake trout are native to the Great Lakes. Anglers prefer to catch lake trout mainly because they grow to large sizes. Fish over 10 pounds are not uncommon, and the state record is over 50 pounds. Lake trout can also live a very long time, and some fish have been aged to over 50 years old. Lake trout are a close relative of brook trout, and some anglers have a difficult time telling the difference between small lake trout and brook trout. The best way to tell the difference is to look at the tail. The yellow arrow on the bottom picture is pointing to the forked tail, which is indicative of a lake trout. If you remember the previous slide, brook trout have square tails. Arctic grayling are in the same family as salmon and trout. They're only native in Wyoming to the Gibbon River and Yellowstone National Park, but they've been stocked in many other lakes and rivers for sport fishing purposes. The best way to identify an Arctic grayling is by its large dorsal fin. Mountain whitefish are closely related to salmon, trout, and grayling, but are in a different family. They're native to Wyoming and are common in the Poposia River system near Lander. Some anglers that catch mountain whitefish incorrectly identify them as suckers. A good way to tell the difference between a mountain whitefish and a sucker is the presence of an adipose fin, which is shown with the yellow arrow in the top picture. Salmon, trout, and grayling also have adipose fins. SAUGER are one of the most unique Wyoming native fish species. They prefer warmer water than trout and are common in the Poposia, Little Poposia, Wind and Little Wind rivers downstream of Hudson and are also common in Boysen Reservoir. The sauger population in the Lander and Riverton area is one of the most unique sauger populations throughout the range of the species because it contains the largest growing and longest living sauger known to science. Sauger have been aged up to 18 years old in the Poposia and Little Wind rivers. A close relative of the sauger that is not native to Wyoming is the walleye. Walleye were stocked in many Wyoming lakes and reservoirs because they're one of the most popular sport fish in North America. They're native to the eastern United States, particularly the Great Lakes. Ocean Lake and Boysen Reservoir are current area waters that provide popular walleye fisheries. It's important for anglers to know the difference between sauger and walleye, especially if fishing at Boysen Reservoir. Anglers can keep up to 6 walleye, but only 2 sauger. The best way to tell the difference between the two species is to look at the dorsal fin. Sauger have a spotted dorsal fin and walleye do not, but walleye have a black patch between the last 2 or 3 membranes at the base of their dorsal fin. Another good way to tell the difference is to look at the caudal fin or tail. Walleye have a white tip at the bottom of their tail and sauger do not. Another good way to tell the difference is to look at the bodies of the fish. Sauger usually have dark mottling and walleye do not. Another fish that is in the same family as sauger and walleye but is not native to Wyoming is the yellow perch. Yellow perch are smaller than sauger and walleye, but were introduced to Wyoming because they are fun to catch and excellent to eat. They are very common in Boysen Reservoir and Ocean Lake. The last fish that I'll talk about in this presentation is the burbot, which is also known by its nickname Ling. Burbot are native to Wyoming and they're the only member of the cod family that lives in fresh water. Burbot are very common in Boysen Reservoir and can also be caught in Ring, Torrey, and Trail Lakes near Dubois, Upper Dinwoody, Lower Dinwoody, and Bull Lakes on the Wind River Reservation, and they can also be captured at Ocean Lake. Burbot are very good to eat, and some anglers call their flesh poor man's lobster.